up, everyone, because today we're diving headfirst into the wild world of organizational culture change.
A topic that's, well, let's be honest, often more aspirational than actually achievable.
That's why we've got a truly juicy case study lined up for you today. Techno.com.
Or TC for short, since we'll be saying it a lot.
So picture this. It's the early 2000s, and TC, this high-tech company, has just spun off from its parent company, Global Tech.
They've got big ambitions, aiming to become a major player in the market.
But there's a nagging question.
Did they have the right culture to match those ambitions?
And thankfully, we've got more than just gut feelings to go on.
Oh yeah, we're not messing around with some fluffy corporate PR piece here.
We've got our hands on a seriously in-depth academic study that dug deep into TC's attempt at transforming their culture.
And they talked to everyone, not just the executives.
From the CEO all the way down to the engineers on the ground floor.
No sugarcoating, just raw, unfiltered insights.
So the study kicks off with management at TC recognizing a problem.
They felt the company was way too internally focused.
A classic symptom of a tech-heavy organization.
Yeah, they were great at building amazing tech, but not so great at understanding what the market actually wanted.
Basically, they needed a major dose of customer centricity if they were going to survive in this new cutthroat landscape.
And it wasn't just a hunch, they were really feeling the pressure.
The study even quotes TC's CEO saying, "Culture always defeats strategy."
Whoa, talk about a bold statement.
Right. It shows how much they believed that culture was the key to their success.
But it also makes you wonder, were they putting too much stock in culture? I mean, could it really make or break a company?
And how common was this belief back then? Was everyone obsessed with culture?
Oh yeah, the early 2000s were peak culture craze in the business world.
Consultants were everywhere, promising that a culture makeover would solve all their problems.
Like some magical cure-all for boosting performance and profits.
So naturally, TC decided to jump on that bandwagon.
They brought in a big-name consulting firm called Excellence to help them figure out this whole culture thing.
What their existing culture was, what their ideal culture should be, the whole shebang.
And Excellence really went all in.
Conducting tons of workshops and interviews across the entire company.
And what they discovered about TC's engineering legacy was fascinating.
It was both their strength and their weakness.
On the one hand, it had led them to all sorts of technical breakthroughs.
But on the other hand, it had instilled a mindset that wasn't always aligned with the fast-paced world of customer needs.
So the question became, how do you bridge that gap?
Did they come up with some radical new values to shake things up?
Well, that's where things get interesting.
Lay on us.
They landed on 6 core values for their so-called target culture: leadership, customer focus, teamwork, open communication, decision-making and rewards, and stories and symbols.
On the surface, those sound pretty generic, almost like something out of a business school textbook.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
It's like they wanted a revolution, but ended up with a set of values that could apply to pretty much any company.
And if you look closely at the specific examples they provided for each value, it gets even thinner.
Really? Give us an example.
Okay, so under leadership, one of the expectations was that leaders should be visible, accessible, and trusted.
Isn't that like Leadership 101?
Exactly. It's so basic, it doesn't even feel specific to Technocom or their unique challenges.
It makes you wonder if they truly believed they were different or if they were just trying to copy some generic best practices.
It's a really important point, and as we'll see later, this lack of clarity around what these values actually meant would come back to bite them.
They were so fixated on defining what these 6 values that they totally overlooked how they would actually translate into everyday behavior.
And that's where the trouble really starts.
Oh yeah, we're just getting to the good part.
The consultants have handed off this shiny new set of values, but now it's time to see how they'll actually be implemented.
And let's just say, it's not exactly a smooth ride from here on out.
It's like a relay race, where the baton gets fumbled at every handoff.
And we'll be back after the break to break down those fumbles and the consequences.
So we're back, and we're picking up right where we left off, with Technocom trying to figure out how to actually put these new values into practice.
They've delivered their recommendations, and now it's up to TC to, well, make it happen.
And this is where that relay race analogy really comes into play. The first handoff is to the HR department.
Okay, so HR is tasked with taking this somewhat abstract set of values and figuring out how to actually implement them in the real world of the company.
Exactly. And the study reveals a pretty significant level of frustration from the HR team.
Really? Why is that?
They felt like they'd been given this poorly designed program, something very theoretical, with not a lot of guidance on how to make it actionable.
So they were basically left holding the bag, trying to figure out how to translate these lofty ideals into concrete steps.
Pretty much, they had to do a lot of reworking, trying to bridge the gap between the theory and the reality of Technocom.
But even with all of HR's efforts, there was still another hurdle, another handoff in this relay race.
Right, they had to get middle management on board.
Because ultimately, they're the ones who would be responsible for actually cascading these values down to their teams.
And this is where we see maybe the biggest disconnect of the entire process.
Oh, this doesn't sound good.
Yeah, the study shows a real struggle for middle management to grasp what these values meant in practice.
So the very people who were supposed to be leading this culture change didn't even fully understand it.
That's right. And the study digs into this, how do you take something like customer focus and translate that into concrete actions for an engineering team that's mostly focused on technical stuff?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's like if those values weren't specific to TC, of course they'd have trouble applying them. Plus, we're talking about engineers. They tend to be more comfortable with concrete solutions, not these vague ideas about values.
Exactly. And to really highlight this disconnect, the study talks about a workshop where middle managers couldn't even agree on who TC's customer was.
Seriously, they were trying to become more customer-centric, and they couldn't even define who their customer was.
It almost sounds comical, but it really underscores the problems with this top-down approach.
They were so focused on pushing these values down the chain of command that they forgot to involve the people who would actually have to make them work.
Right, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You can't just impose culture from the top down.
It needs buy-in, it needs understanding, it needs people to actually participate in the process.
Absolutely. It's like trying to teach someone a new language without giving them a dictionary or any grammar rules.
And to make matters worse, Technocom seems to have thought they could just package and deliver their culture like it was a product.
That's right, and this is where we see this concept of hyperculture in full swing.
Oh yeah, the infamous cultural kit. Tell me more about that. What was in it, and why was this approach so flawed?
So the cultural kit, right, it was essentially this collection of materials, like a starter pack for TC's new culture.
Like a welcome basket, but for values?
Yeah, something like that. The study mentions posters with the core values, pamphlets outlining the desired behaviors.
Did they have like a branded stress ball with customer focus printed on it?
I don't know with the stress ball, but you get the idea. They were trying to make culture tangible.
And that's exactly what hyperculture is, right? Trying to treat culture like it's a product you can just hand out.
Exactly, and it completely misses the point that culture is something that emerges organically. It's about shared beliefs and behaviors, not a prepackaged set of instructions.
Yeah, it's not like installing software. You can't just download a new culture.
And that's why, despite all the effort and money spent on this initiative, the cultural kit just didn't work.
So employees saw right through it.
Oh yeah, they called it a paper product, something
Right.
superficial that had no real impact on their day-to-day work.
It's like imagine you're an engineer, you're used to dealing with concrete problems, and then you get handed this vague pamphlet about teamwork.
It's just not going to resonate. And the study actually quotes some middle managers who couldn't even remember what the 6 core values were.
Wow, so they couldn't even remember the values, let alone actually implement them.
It really highlights the disconnect between the top-down approach and the reality on the ground.
So what's the big takeaway here? What can we learn from Technocom's, shall we say, less than successful culture change attempt?
I think the key lesson is that culture change can't be forced. You can't just engineer it from the top down.
It's more about creating the right environment, fostering open communication, and allowing the culture to evolve naturally.
Exactly. And it's also about understanding that culture isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's constantly evolving.
So Technocom's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of trying to force culture change and the importance of recognizing that real change has to come from within.
Well said. And I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive into Technocom's culture transformation project.
What do you think, listeners? Could they have done things differently? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so head over to our social media and join the conversation. Until next time.